All right, everyone turn their mic on. Welcome to special meeting, Deer Creek Board of Education I-006 at the Deer Creek Performing Arts and Athletic Center. Welcome. In accordance with the policy BDA, BDA-R, KD, and KD-R, the superintendent has established the following procedures for public participation at regular board meeting. In an effort to conduct school business and complete the scheduled agenda, discussions and comments from the public. There's no comments from the public because of special meeting. Disregard that. Please review the following expectations for in-person attendance. Food and drink are not allowed in the auditorium. Masks are to be worn firmly, covering the nose and mouth. Seating is only available in physically distanced marked areas. Speaking, shouting, or out of turn during the business meeting is strictly prohibited. Should you choose not to follow the audience expectations, you will be asked to leave. Public view and access is on youtube.deercreekschools.org. Secretary, call to order and roll call.
Keene.
Here.
Neves. Here. Lay. Here. Barnes.
Here.
Bamford. Here. We have 5 members present. The time is 5:01.
B is consideration of and vote on the consent agenda items. All of the following items, which concern reports and items of a routine nature normally approved at board meetings, will be approved by one vote unless any board member desires to have a separate vote on any of or all of these items. The consent agenda consists of the discussion, consideration, and approval of the following items. 1 is the Board of Education minutes. 2, schedule of encumbrances A through E. 3, financial reports A through C. 4, district surplus. 5, contract between Grand Life Photography and Deer Creek Elementary for school photography services for 21-22 school year. Contracts between Oklahoma State School Pictures and Deer Creek 4th and 5th for 21-22 school year. Service agreement between Jocelyn's and Deer Creek for 21-22, and that's with the high school. Memorandum of understanding between Deer Creek Schools and University of Oklahoma for 2020-2021, and software service order agreement between Deer Creek Schools and Municipal Accounting Systems 2021-2022 fiscal year. Do I have any questions or discussions or need to pull any of those out to talk about? Do I have a motion to accept the consent agenda items?
I'll move to accept the consent agenda items numbers 1 through 9.
I'll second.
Lay, yes. Bamford.
Yes.
Keene.
Yes.
Neves.
Yes.
Barnes.
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
Next, letter C is Superintendent Renette Tippin's report.
Okay, tonight, James Edwards, Josh Critchfield, and Jeff Johnson have been working on just a report to you, not only about finance, but also about the growth in the district that is ahead of us. So wanted you to get a little glimpse of what's happening out in the district.
I'm going to blend both of these together, so we'll start a little bit on the finance part, and then we'll kind of roll into the growth in the district.
We've got some feedback down here. You're probably hearing it too.
Let me try this.
That might.
I'll move it over here. It might be pick it up from yours. Can you hear me, Josh? Is that good? Okay.
Thanks, Josh.
James, you still need to stay pretty much in front of the mic so that it
Okay.
can record.
On our Deer Creek Schools website, if you go there to just the finance page, we have a lot of links that we've been sharing with our legislators and other constituents throughout the state. So that's always available, along with some of our other estimate and needs, our yearly audits and things that are on the Deer Creek finance page. Real quick, we're going to look at our revenue comparisons and kind of show we talk about Deer Creek's challenges with revenue, and I want to show our comparisons to some of our neighbors and a few others in the state, just to kind of give you an explanation and example of the disparities there. This is per pupil. I pulled a few small schools that you can see over here to the left, and you can see how high per pupil revenue that they get. Tologa getting $36,000 per pupil, while if you look clear over there to the right, Deer Creek, we get $5,900 per pupil. A lot of these has to do with, and primarily is likely gross production in those smaller communities. When you have a high amount of gross production and a small school, you're going to get a lot more revenue in there. But it does give an inequity to our kids throughout the state when this occurs. A lot of times what will happen is they'll actually go what they call off the formula, and so they won't even be getting state aid directly from the state of Oklahoma, but rather they'll get more local gross production and other chargeables. So they'll pull out of the actual formula. Our building fund is also has to do with some local ad valorem. You can see a couple of them there. Terrell, I would assume that they have a large plant of some sort there that brings in that tax to be able to have that much per pupil. You can see Deer Creek over at the far right, $344. It is more than some of our neighbors, Putnam City and Middale, but it's still relatively low. And when you look even at the average to the state of Oklahoma, the state average is $389. So it's about $45 per student that we're below the state average. On our current stimulus funding that's being provided from the federal government, there's a couple numbers up here that you can look at. The first one is the total CARES Act, which was our first stimulus package, also sometimes referred to as ESSER 1, and then ESSER 2 is the most recent package that was out there. So if you're looking at about 541 districts in the state average for the total of the stimulus that was out there is over $1,000 per student. At Deer Creek, we're getting about $144 per pupil, and this is based on this school year. You may see other numbers in here or out and about that may be a little bit different from these, and those are usually because they're using last year's average daily membership. So depending on which ones you're using, you'll see a little discrepancy there. But overall, even if we used last year's numbers, it's not going to adjust our number more than a few dollars. The lower number where it says ESSER 2 is our latest stimulus. And you can see the state average there on the latest stimulus is $845. Deer Creek's was $122. Of the 540 schools, there's 100 districts that were getting below the 600 per student, 70 below 500 per student, and 7, which includes Deer Creek, that were below 200 per student out of the 540 districts. The funding is provided through the Title I federal funds. And so those numbers at Deer Creek are much lower than the state average, much lower than anyone in the state. And so that is reflected in our number that we actually get in the stimulus funds.
The state government decided that? Federal government decided? Who decided to use that?
The federal government decided that.
Federal government decided
yes.
that? Okay.
They do have some funds that were set aside when they first got this ESSER 2 money. About 10%, I believe, was set aside. And that still could be allocated, and we're hoping that some of that may be allocated to some of those schools that are on this lower spectrum. You can compare us to some of the local schools here. Gives you a good idea kind of where we're at compared to some of our neighbors. I did put Frontier. It's just a smaller school. It's up north, I believe, of Stillwater. It used to be called Red Rock, I think. But they're getting $1,164, so they're getting over $1,000 more than us per student. And they were also on that one earlier where they're getting a lot of local revenue. So not only were they getting a lot of revenue more than us before, but in addition, now they're getting some additional revenue that we're not going to be able to see. Oklahoma City, Tulsa, Western Heights, you can see the over $1,899 for Western Heights, over $2,000 for Tulsa and Oklahoma City. And again, those are based on this year's numbers. You'll see some other numbers that'll bring those numbers down that were based on last year's ADM, but this is this year's ADM when we're actually getting the money for those kids. Over on the right, you can see Epic Blended, Epic One-on-One. There's basically broke up into two different groups. If you combine those together, they're getting over $1,600 per student. I guess you're not getting over $1,600, you'd have to average that out, but you're getting $777 per student for Epic Blended kids and $847 for the Epic One-on-One kids. Earlier this year, we touched on our midterm adjustment, which hits us each year because we get those chargeables get charged back against us, our local ad valorem, motor vehicle, county 4-mill, a couple other small ones that'll affect our midterm adjustment. Usually we have a large increase in students, about 300 students per year, and that'll offset that midterm adjustment, so we won't see a loss. This year, of course, with the kind of the statewide trend of going to Epic, we lost several students that went elsewhere to Epic and other schools. And so we didn't see that increase in students. And so we did get a midterm loss of about $276 per student. If we add in what the state or the federal government's given us for a stimulus, which you would hope would offset that, we got $144 per student. So our net loss, even after our federal stimulus, actually 2 packages, is $132. And that's if we're looking at all of it being spent this year, which some of it was spent, there's a little bit of it we spent last fiscal year. So you can kind of see those breakdowns and kind of how it's affecting this. The numbers on the left is per pupil, numbers on the right's the actual dollar figures. Okay, our student growth. We've had a lot of challenges. We've had a lot of high growth. At the same time, a lot more dense housing has been in Deer Creek, and our funding has gone down. So as we kind of take those into account, we'll look at these next couple slides. Here's our 10-year growth, and I think I shared this with you a while back, but you can see Deer Creek over on the far right from 2010 to 2020, about 92% growth. And if you're looking at Oklahoma City, Tulsa, Western Heights, those same schools that I was showing you how much money they were getting for stimulus this year, they're actually losing students compared to what they had 10 years ago. And so while we're getting a lot more students and a lot less stimulus, a lot less revenue, a lot of other districts, and it's not anything against those districts, but it's not equal. There's a large inequity that's building up throughout the state because of this. Our net assessed value, again, you can see how much business and industry actually is in Deer Creek versus some others. This is some reasons like Taloga, Frontier, Terrell, Cashin. They have a lot of business industry. They have a lot of gross production and those type of things that is the main revenue for those small districts. But you also have places like Western Heights, it's right here in the Oklahoma City area, that's 50% from business and industry. Like we said before, whenever you have a business come in, you don't have kids that are already getting their cut from those buildings that are going up. When you have a house that goes in and they bring 2 kids with them, the taxes that they're actually putting back towards the district is going to get divided between their kids first, then to the district if there happens to be an additional revenue stream there. Bonding capabilities. This is if we were to put everybody on the equal 36 mills, which is what Deer Creek has to be at right now to sustain our bonds. You can see that a larger city like Oklahoma City could bond $85 million a year. Edmond could do $78 million a year, while Deer Creek is at $17 million a year. And this is the money that would actually go into our our sinking fund to pay those bonds each year. So that's kind of our max that we can make on a yearly payment, so to speak, for a bond. So comparing us even against Western Heights, who's a much smaller district than us, they're almost at the same amount of capacity on bonding. To share some information on a recent article that was put out in October of 2020. The article was basically talking about how much money Deer Creek had. And while it was true that we do have a lot more funding now than we had 10 years ago. We've almost doubled, or actually, I'm sorry, it's 46% more than what we had. We've almost doubled our number of students in the district in that same time frame. So if you're doubling your population and you're only 46% higher on your funding, that's pretty easy math to show that we haven't been able to keep up with our funding per student over that time period. The numbers that were also in that article took into account our building fund, our sinking fund, our activity funds, our yearly carryover, all of those in addition to our general fund. It's usually it's pretty much understood when you're looking at a per pupil revenue. It's usually figured on our general fund in the state. And so when you have an article like this that goes out, it kind of misrepresents what everybody else is going by in the state. So you can skew some people's understanding of actually what is out there for our district. Your carryover funds, and I'm sorry it's so small, but carryover funds basically are not new revenue. So to average those into new revenue per pupil calculations is just not accurate. So you can't really add those in. Those are left over from the year before. Basically, the reason we have our carryover is so we can make sure to pay our bills at the beginning of the year. It's not unlike our personal accounts at home, and you try to have a balance there so you can pay your bills. And if you don't, you won't be able to pay your bills. That's the same thing with us. Our building fund, we utilize that for maintenance, equipment, operational expenses, our property and casualty insurance. We don't get enough funding each year to be able to pay all those out of building fund. We have to use general fund to pay a lot of those expenses. So also, if you're looking at building fund and saying, well, building fund takes care of that, it really doesn't. It takes care of a small amount of that. Our activity fund, which I believe was also in those numbers, is a local revenue. And as we've seen this year, you don't know if that's going to be there or not. Due to the pandemic, we've struggled to have as many fundraisers in the district, which has provided for our activity funds in the past. So you can't look at those for a year in, year out source. And finally, one of them that was in there, and probably the biggest thing that skewed those numbers, was our sinking fund. And our sinking fund money is basically used to pay bonds or judgments against the district, but primarily our bonds. And as you saw earlier, we could bond up to a payment of $17 million a year approximately. And so that money goes into our sinking fund, and then we pay a bond with it. You don't use it for salaries, benefits, or any other costs. It's there to pay those two things. And so to say that we're getting that money to be able to provide for our students in the classroom is somewhat, you could say it's true. Yes, it's there. It's providing for our classroom space. It's providing for desks, and it's providing for books and technology and some things there. But we can't pay a penny of salary out of that. So trying to offer our students more in the classroom through a sinking fund is just not allowed. It's not something we can do. So that's just kind of a misrepresentation that's out there on how we can actually use some of these funds. And it's good to have a good understanding of this so you know that the district are using our funds wisely. Next, we were talking a little bit about our growth, and Mr. Critchfield and Mr. Rainbolt went throughout the district and spoke with a lot of the developers, thank you, Jeff, throughout the district, and kind of asked them where they were at and what they expected from their developments and how much they were going to be able to provide on that. So I'll let Mr. Critchfield kind of touch on that.
Thank you, James. Good evening. Well, James has given us all scary news of growth over the past 10 years. I'm going to give you a little bit of scary news for growth over the next 6 or 7 years. What you see on the wall ahead of you is a map of our district. The areas outlined in red are kind of what we consider our top 10 areas that we're following, because that's where we see the densest growth happening in the short term. You'll notice that all of these areas are inside either Oklahoma City city limits or Edmond city limits. So they are not affected by the county zoning committee at all. What we see here is a list from the developers we reached out to. Again, this is not comprehensive. This is only the larger areas that we're watching where we expect very dense population growth. We're looking at, in just the larger areas in the red circles that were outlined in the previous slide, about 4,000 houses in the next 5 to 7 years. And the majority of that will be finished in the next 3 to 5.
They just get, oops.
Yes, these are the PUDs that are already
The
approved.
4,000, this is the 4,000 you were already talking
There's
about.
4,000 approved, there's 4,000 that are approved, but they don't have the plat. So there's a total of 8,000 that we're aware of, and there's enough land in the Oklahoma City area alone to do another 4,000. So you have up to 12,000 homes, bringing 2.3 children per home. But these are the ones that are truly under construction, and Josh is going to show you a little bit more about that.
We have some photos that go along with this. The first one, on the next slide, is a neighborhood called Deerbrook at 150th and Rockwell. Deerbrook is, I can't tell if that's me causing the feedback or not. Deerbrook is the elementary school that services it is Spring Creek. There's about 317 new homes we expect to be finished in there in the next 3 years. Special thanks to Joe Rainbolt for the beautiful aerial photography. The next slide is of the apartment complex I'm sure you've seen on Northwest 192nd and May Avenue. This complex has a total of 371 units. While we were talking to the developer building this and getting an account, they also notified us there's another apartment complex going in 1 mile to the south at 178th and May Avenue. That's also going to have, I believe, about 200 units.
Houses and apartments, 2.3.
What we had and what's been reported in the past has been 2.3 children per door.
Per door.
Per
Okay.
door.
In this we have Lone Oak Farms, which is also Lone Oak North. The area you can see here is mostly finished, but what I'd like to draw your attention to is the area on the top of the picture. That is also platted and to be built in the next few years. There's approximately 160 houses still to be built in that neighborhood. And the next one we have Echo Ridge, 164th and MacArthur, just south of Still Meadows. This one has been platted. It has 198 homes. They expect that to be finished by 2026. And then we have Twin Silos. This one is heavily built already, but this neighborhood is going to be very large. We see 313 homes still yet to be built in this neighborhood. That does not include any that are under construction right now. In addition to this, another area that we didn't have time to photograph because we got the information a little later than the rest, there is a very large neighborhood going in across from the new apartment complex on 192nd and May Avenue, which is going to be about 1,100 homes. It's a neighborhood being developed by Home Creations. On each side of May Avenue, there's going to be 550 on one side and 650 on the other. So just a quick snapshot of what we're looking at in the next few years. I'm sorry, I feel like we've depressed everybody. James is usually so easy to follow. We were talking about that earlier this week. But tonight I don't have any good news on this subject.
I think tonight you're right in the same boat as James. But as you look at that, we've been talking about this, that this is coming to us very quickly. And when you start thinking of, he's given you about 4,000 homes in the next 4 to 6 years, and if they each bring 2.3 children, the school that we built holds 1,600 children. It takes us...
You're talking about the 4-5 center.
The 4-5 center. That takes Deer Creek approximately 8 years to pay off at that $16 million a year that we can pay in our sinking fund. So it tells you it's very difficult for Deer Creek because we don't have the business and industry. You saw that our business and industry revenue was the lowest up there. We're 2% services, 2% business. It's going to be a very challenging problem to be able to bond the revenue needed to build the schools, to have square footage under desks and chairs for the students that will come from those 4,000. That has nothing, that does not include all of the county area of Deer Creek. And we have quite a few additions being proposed on a regular basis to our county. A couple of those have each been 600 home additions on a quarter section. So Deer Creek has a lot of challenges ahead. The biggest piece of this is that we really only have 2% business, 2% services. So we don't have ad valorem to balance it. The other thing that James mentioned about carry forward, and I just wanted to go back to that for a moment, but in Deer Creek, carry forward is very, very critical because we're very ad valorem dependent in our funding. Over 50% of our funding is ad valorem. That doesn't come till January. So your state payments are broken out over the 12 months, so we get 1/12 from the state, but we get 0 on the other 50+% until January. So January through March, when people are paying their taxes, that's when that revenue begins to come in and we even out again. If Deer Creek doesn't have a good carry forward, they would go into non-payables on salaries. So it does make for a very challenging financial picture to balance, to always make sure that you can take care of that. And a lot of people don't really understand how critically important carry forward is to all schools, but especially schools that are ad valorem dependent, because they've got to have those funds to be able to pay salaries starting July 1 through December 31.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes, great job. Thank you.
Great job. Thank you, Josh. Thank you, James. Really appreciate that. And I really do want to give a big shout out to Josh and for the getting out and getting all these pictures and really talking to people and getting that together for us. Thank you.
And Mr. Edwards, did I understand from the first slide that all of this information is on the Deer Creek page where Deer Creek Finance? And I believe you said too, the external audits that are done are located there as well. Okay, thank you.
That's it. deercreekschools.org/district/finance.
There it is. Thank you. And Renetta, is there anything else we can do about this besides try to influence our legislative leaders in fixing this funding issue?
Number one is to talk to legislators about the inequity and also the lack of adequate funding for schools. That's first and foremost, is to speak with them in terms of funding. In terms of growth, your Oklahoma City Planning Commission or your county planning commissions are important to talk to as well. If you go on the county website, you can see their last study and you can read through that. And one of the things that they really stressed was that water going west of Meridian is very deep. There's not a lot. And it's also high in mineral content. Its quality is not good as well. So when you begin to put housing additions coming in west of Meridian, and the majority of the ones that have been proposed have been some at MacArthur and some on Council, the water supply is not there. Sewer is available in some of those areas, but sewer is also not there. Probably the number one issue that was in the study for the county that has not been addressed is we are still 2-lane roads and 2-lane bridges. And I see Laura Holmes out here. Laura is our attorney, and she and I tend to go opposite directions. And when it flooded, I was coming up MacArthur when she was trying to go down MacArthur, and it took both of us 2 hours to get in or out. So if you have a crisis or an emergency in flooding, we only have 2 main ways to get in and out, and that's MacArthur and then on Portland. And as you noticed in the snow, we had a wreck on a couple of both of those, and it locked down Deer Creek again. So Deer Creek has some very interesting things because we have such a large rural area with 2-lane roads, 2-lane bridges, and not a great water supply, especially as you go west of Meridian. So those are some of our concerns when you look at county developments, is that those things have not been addressed. So we've talked both to Oklahoma City Planning as well as the county planning commissions about those concerns, that we still have big concerns. You know that on Rockwell, when we are full in session, the lanes back up on Rockwell when we're just trying to get kids to school again because it's a 2-lane road. So there's a lot of development on roads and bridges, and the county is a lot like Deer Creek. Its funding is a lot like Deer Creek. They have challenges making that happen as well. So those are some of the things that as you're talking with commissioners or you're talking with legislators, I think it's very important to say and help them understand that if they look at their own map, if they look at their own plan, the things that they say have to be in place in order for it to develop are not there. The bigger concern is the fact that Oklahoma City's is already, the PUDs are approved and the plats are approved on at least half of those. So that's something that there's really very little that we can do, and those are the things that Josh was talking about today. That growth is coming, and the quantity of schools that you need to put in place. And I will also tell you that when you look for land, and John Robertson's probably one of the best, he looked with me for about a year and a half, land in the southwest, land in the central and northeast is by the square foot. So in order to do a building back when we were looking for land the first time, it was going to take between $6 and $12 million to get enough land to build an elementary school. That price has only gone up in the last 5 years, so I'm sure it is higher than the $6 to $12 million. And at that time, we had $500,000 allocated for our land purchase. So it takes a huge chunk out of your bonding capacity. As you saw again, $16 million. Just to buy the land for one school would take 1 year's bond payment. And so that presents some different concerns that Deer Creek has to look at when they're deciding where to place a school.
Okay, next.
Okay, we did a 2-in-1 there, so
Okay.
the superintendent's report is finished.
Okay. Next, we'll go to business item D. Number 1 is discussion and possible vote to approve bid for upgrade of LED lighting at high school baseball field and stadium, expenditures to be paid from bond funds.
Good evening. So we we took bids, we asked for bids and took them for upgrading the lighting at our baseball field and our football field to go from a metal halide lamp to LED. And I put a bid tab sheet on each of your desks for to look at, and my proposal to go with. The parent low bid was KB Electric, and that's what if you so choose, that's what I'm asking for tonight for approval.
Can you flash them on and off when they score?
I opted not to do that, but the beauty of the LED, obviously, if they did go off, they will come back on.
Back on immediately?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, so we did have some extra controls going to be built in, but it was a little bit more money to do the flashing deal, so.
Okay.
And with this lighting, we should be able to possibly get a rebate from,
We will get, yes, I had to have approval from OG&E, and we will get some money for the actual fixtures and not the labor back. I'm waiting to see what that is. I'll have to visit with them, but yes, that's why we started this way, too.
right.
Any other questions or discussion? Do I have a motion to accept?
So moved.
Second,
Lay, yes. Bamford?
yes.
Keen?
Yes.
Neves?
Yes.
Barnes?
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
All right,
Thank
number
you.
2, discussion and possible vote on Deer Creek Return to Learn timeline. So the vote in motion happened 2 weeks ago to return to school. It was felt maybe that there wasn't quite enough, whether minimal discussion, and it was felt that there needed to be some discussion on this topic. So this is what this is, discussion on the topic. So it's open for discussion.
I will begin on this one. First, I wanted to thank you, Dr. Keen, as president of the board, and Renette, for allowing this matter to be on tonight's agenda. I understand that it caused a lot of apprehension. I received many emails of parents very concerned, and I understand that. They've already made plans, kids are excited, and I know parents are excited. And so I answered every single email that I know all of us received, just explaining that this should be on every agenda until we're through it, that this is changing daily. Dr. David Kendrick, I spoke to him this weekend a little bit. He is a board-certified pediatrician, internal medicine. He's the chairman of the Department of Informatics at OU Health Science Center. And he's the CEO of My Health Access Network. And what they do is they track local data by zip code, by city. And the most interesting thing he said to me is that this cannot be a one-and-done policy, and that we just need to keep this on the agenda, and that it doesn't necessarily mean we're going to change direction. But with as quickly as information is changing, it's very important that we talk about this. And I would ask that it be on every agenda going forward. And I would also ask that the Return to Learn Committee be consulted, as they were, at least a week before the board meeting. I was thinking maybe twice a month, but I don't think the administration or teachers may want to devote that much time to it. But I would ask that we keep this on the agenda so that we can explore all the different things that may be happening, and to get feedback from the Return to Learn Committee. The information is changing quickly. For example, the Friday after that last meeting, the Stillwater Public Schools has had a lawsuit where a group of parents had sued the district, demanding 5 days a week return, had filed for an injunction. And the decision came down from that court the Friday after our meeting. And the court had held in that case that the school district could not be made to have the children come back 5 days a week, because it had been following CDC guidelines, it had been following the State Department of Health, it had been following the State Department of Education. And so there was no reason to push and have that kind of order against the district. And the reason that I found this is important is, again, information is changing. This is a pandemic. Our legislatures aren't being a lot of help. I'm hoping the federal government, the CDC, is supposed to be issuing some guidelines soon for schools that I think will be helpful. And then now we have the judicial branch answering and issuing orders in cases all across the country. So I think when something that local happens, that we need to listen to it and take that into consideration. And at the last meeting, we had 5 options, and we didn't really get to delve into those too much. And I had voiced my concerns, and of course, I was a vote no, but I want to be very clear. This is one of the main reasons I wanted to bring this up. I have the utmost respect and love for every single member up on this stage. And just because we may not agree, and just because a vote may go a different way, it doesn't mean that we are not all 100% behind this district, and to make sure that whatever decision is made, that we are going to make sure that it is done in the most efficient, the most safe way possible. Now, sometimes that means we have to ask hard questions, and we have to have productive dialogue. And we do that separately, but the problem that's happened is you guys don't see that. Our stakeholders may not see that. And if I've learned anything in this position, is when people can't hear or see the reasoning behind our decisions, they're going to make up their own stories about it. And I don't say that out of disrespect for the stories that they may have, because, it's human nature. We do it ourselves. If somebody doesn't answer an email, I think, oh, I must have said something the wrong way, or, are they mad at me, or they disagree with me? When in reality, you know what? They're probably just really busy. They're probably trying to figure out, how to get their kids logged into Canvas or something like that. And so people start to create stories. And case in point, 2 meetings ago when I was gone on vacation, there was not a vote to return to learn. I was told there wouldn't be a vote. We all agreed. We wanted to get more information on the vaccine. That turned into, we're not allowed to go back 5 days a week because Miss Bamford was on vacation. Now, I don't really care about that story because it's just not true. And I know it's not true. But here are the stories that I care about. Here are the stories that I've heard when people don't know the reasons for our decisions. And after the last meeting, those stories have become, we don't care about teachers, which is not true. The stories have become, we gave up and caved in to a handful of bullies online. That's not true. The stories have become, well, we're just tired. We don't want to talk about it anymore. That's not true. The other story, we don't care what the Return to Learn Committee says. That is absolutely not true. And I know everyone here will echo that. But the problem has become, if we don't openly discuss it, if we're not transparent, if we're not communicating what we're doing, these kind of stories are going to continue to be divisive in our community. And so what I wanted to do tonight was just take some time and really consider our options. Are there other resources to make sure that social distancing is available? I know there's been some news about the vaccine, which I find is encouraging. And so I just kind of wanted us tonight just to kind of, I have a couple of questions I wanted to ask, but that's why I wanted it on the agenda again tonight. And I thank you, Dr. Keene and Renette, for putting that on there. One of the questions I have is just about the social distancing piece, and maybe Renette, you can talk to that. What are we able to do, because that is a CDC guideline. What can we do to make sure that we are doing the best we can to be socially distanced?
Well, I know all of the sites are looking at different ways to group their desks. They're looking at doing some quad settings for some of the grade levels. Each grade level is different. in how you have to approach that. They're looking at assigned seating. They've been doing assigned seating. They're looking at, some of them are looking at assigned seating in the cafeterias. Our elementary cafeterias in particular are very small. And so that's one of the more challenging areas, along with buses. Buses have been riding half, and so that's worked relatively well. There's still a few that are fairly full, even with half. But when we go back full, parents will have the choice whether or not to have their kids ride. That's certainly not something that's mandated, nor is it funded by the state. So that's an area that I think families can make that decision. For us in the cafeterias, when you go to more lunches, then you get into plan times and schedules and all the schedules of the electives and what we guarantee teachers. You also, teachers it's negotiated. They have a 30-minute duty-free lunch. And so a lot of people have said, well, we can go to the classroom. Well, that's not that easy. One, it's negotiated. Two, they only get 30 minutes. And we do really feel like they need that little bit of a 30-minute break. Some of the schools are looking at setting some tables outside the cafeterias in the halls. Some are looking at some individual desk settings. But I will tell you that one of the most difficult things in this is to do the physical distancing. Masks we've done from the beginning, and families have come around and really supported that. Masks will continue with breaks out on playgrounds. When they work in different groupings, still trying to keep that distance of 6 feet. For the younger kids, there are some suggestions that 3 feet may be enough. And so I would tell you that we're working on that and measuring that. But physical distancing is one of those things that will be difficult. Hand washing and hand sanitizing is something that we've been doing, we'll continue to do. That's pretty easy to do. The masks, the staff members all have shields. Some students have shields because they work better with shields. And one of the things that came out today that was on the news that they said was most critical is to consider double masking. And so I think those are the options. If you look at our school data, if you look at our internal data is no better than a lot of schools that are back full traditional. It's good.
Yeah, that is
It's good, but it's not particularly better. I do believe the primary focus has to be on the masks and the hand washing.
And with regard to the mask, I do want to bring this up because I have had a lot of concerns. I just hope we want to reiterate to our staff and the students to make sure that the masks are being worn properly. There are a lot of concerns that it's kind of a little bit lax, and maybe that's because of the ability to socially distance better under the hybrid. But I think, if we are going to be not being able to do the 6 feet, that we need to be very careful with the mask. Are we able to do 3 feet in the primary?
I think we can definitely, it may be that they're in those, like I said, they're either in pairs or a quad group. And that group will be a little closer, but that quad group would be 3 to 6 feet from the next one.
So we'll be able, so they're trying to do like Piedmont was doing with kindergarten through 6th, was to put them in groups of 4, is that right?
Right.
Okay. Now,
So we're looking at some of those different groupings. Like I said, each site's a little different, each building's constructed a little different. So,
right.
And the grade levels.
Is there, now that's great for the pre-K through 6. Is secondary able to do that at all? Will they be able to do the pods or 3 feet?
I think when you look at the teachers, probably the secondary in the form of instruction probably will manage the 6 feet from the students a little bit better. Our secondary students leave and pile in the same car. They're together in a lot of things. It's concerning to us, but in all honesty, if we get them back into a structured setting, I think some of the outside exposures may actually reduce a little bit for us. I have to hope that this deep freeze is going to do wonderful things for our rates of incident. And they are dropping. But I would tell you, if you go back and you look at, and I could have Linus, if you want to, do you want to share a little bit about the sheet? Would you come up for just a moment, or I can share it? But if you look at our positives have primarily come from outside the district. And our quarantines, so I'd like for you just to go through just a little bit of that.
Okay, I broke this down to 3 areas for you. First semester data, second semester data through February 5th, and then year-to-date data, which would have been August 14th through February 5th. I don't know which one you want, or if you want all 3. I can do year-to-date.
Year-to-date, do just year-to-date.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, like I talked about at the last board meeting, regarding the number of staff that we've had to quarantine due to exposure to another staff member or to a student or to an outside exposure, is based on incidence. So for me to give you a percentage, it's very difficult because some of those incidents remain with the same person. You can have one person who may have been exposed by a staff member or a student, and then several months later maybe was exposed at home by a spouse. So I've given you the numbers there. The number of staff quarantined due to exposure to another staff member was 77. Incidents, not people, but incidents. Number of staff quarantined due to exposure to a student was 48. Number of staff quarantined due to outside exposure was 187. And then the next ones I can do percentages because these are individual cases. The number of staff members who have tested positive is 99, which is 14.7% of our staff. The number of positive staff who were exposed at Deer Creek to another staff member and then tested positive was 3, which is 0.4%. And then the number of positive staff who were exposed to a Deer Creek student and then tested positive was 0.1%.
And Linus, I want to thank you for keeping up with all of this data. I can't imagine how difficult that must be. And so I don't want to ever come across that I'm questioning your processes or collecting data at all. I think we would agree we don't exactly mirror any other district. And it's probably fair to say that there's not an exact mirror. I know that we've talked about Piedmont. A lot of the other districts have larger classrooms, more space. And so I'm not sure that, I appreciate the data on comparing us to other districts, but the CDC guidelines are very clear in that we need to look at community spread and community data, and not just to rely solely on school data because we aren't testing our kids, and that every school is different. But this, I do agree that this is a factor we should consider. In your I know that you've had discussions with the Oklahoma County Department of Health, Ms. Lowry, quite a bit, and she's been very helpful. I spoke to her this week. Did she share with you her concerns about using more public schools as a comparison?
No, she did not. We have not talked about that specifically.
Okay.
And as on that third sheet that I gave you, I used more than just more. I've got Shawnee, Moore, Choctaw, Yukon, Piedmont.
Yes.
Then of course some Jinx, Owasso, Union, Norman, Edmond comparisons, some in AB schedule
Right.
and some in full traditional. So I've tried to use more than just more.
Yes, I appreciate that.
Because I don't think that that's fair, whether it's just Piedmont or whether it's just more. I think that we need to be looking at a broader spectrum, which is why I tried to add a little bit more data
Yes,
here.
and I do appreciate that. It's good to see that. I just know she did express some concerns about more public schools data, that they just have concerns about their reporting. And with regard to Piedmont, I don't think we got to discuss this last time, but the pre-K through 6 is 4 days a week, correct? But the secondary is staying on the hybrid model.
That is correct,
And-
as far as I know. I know the secondary is staying on an AB schedule. And
Right.
I know the elementaries are traditional, and I do believe it's 4-day, Diana? Oh, they're 5-day?
They're 5-day.
Okay, so
Okay.
5-day, yes.
And with regard to Edmond, they are staying on the hybrid until the vaccine is available for their teachers.
I would defer
Does
to
it-
Renette on that
Renette,
one. I
was
have
that
not
the
been in
last finding of
contact
their
with
school
them.
board? Did I hear that correctly?
On which one?
Edmond, that they were remaining hybrid until they could get their teachers vaccinated?
They reconsider that regularly, just like ours.
Right, but the last time they,
The last time I
Last
talked to
time.
Brett Town, they were remaining AB and really looking toward the vaccine.
okay. Is there any reason why our secondary could not stay on hybrid? I mean, we're so close to getting the vaccine, hopefully on the 22nd. Is there some reason why the secondary couldn't wait until after spring break to return? Would we be open to considering that? So I think that part of it was kind of a surprise to our secondary and the Return to Learn committee is why could we consider, why wouldn't we just wait till spring break? And it didn't quite make sense to me why to come back and then just 1 week later we're going to be on spring break. So is there some merit to doing that, to considering that?
And I think that as far as waiting for a vaccine, I mean, they said February 12th, now they're saying February 22nd, and so then they'll say March 8th, and I just don't think you can hang your hat on that date. We'll be just waiting forever.
I do think we can actually,
you?
hopefully, hang our hat on February 22nd based on Governor Stitt's news conference today. So we have a clinic, a vaccine clinic. We had one set up for February 12th that we had to cancel. We had one set up for February 19th. That's prior to February 22nd. So we will have to cancel that one. We have another one set up March 1st, which is 1 week from Monday.
Okay?
If all goes as planned, as was stated today in the media, that vaccines will be released for all educators and those with comorbidities, we should be vaccinated by March 1st because we for sure have that clinic. However, I have reached back out and asked if there was any possible way to get a clinic prior to March 1st and told them I'd be ready and willing to do whatever we needed to do that. I've not heard back yet.
So it's the 22nd, what are we going to do if all of our teachers want to go get the vaccine on the 22nd? That's the day we're supposed to be back for pre-K through 6.
So if we are able to get if we here in Deer Creek are able to get a clinic, we would set the clinic up beginning in the afternoon and into the evening hours so that we could meet that schedule, their schedules as best as possible.
Okay.
Fridays obviously are best for clinics, and our 2 Fridays have bypassed us, the 12th and the 19th, that we are not able to do that. So at this point, I'm not sticking to a Friday. I want it as soon as possible, and we will do whatever we need to do. If I have to stay up here till midnight, I will do that, but we want to get our teachers vaccinated. I've also gotten links here and there periodically that I send out. We had one that occurred just yesterday. I think I sent 4 emails. My poor employees are tired of seeing my name. We thought we had it, then we thought we might not have it, but it has turned out today that everyone who signed up, who was canceled, got another email later today that they had been accepted. So we are getting people in. There are more and more. They're even getting vaccinated before the clinic that we have scheduled, which makes me so happy for them. So I'm looking at, after this week, I am looking at approximately 300 staff, maybe a little over 300 staff still desiring the vaccination. What I will also recommend to our staff members is that if we cannot provide the clinic either in a time frame that they can come get a vaccination, or they want it before we can do the clinic, we are giving them every opportunity to sign up anywhere. It is not, our main priority is for anyone who chooses to get vaccinated, that they get vaccinated no matter when and where that is. So it doesn't have to be in the Deer Creek Clinic.
Okay.
And that may very well occur if we can't have our clinic till March 1st. They may, through that whole week, find other appointments available. And I would highly encourage that they would seek those out.
Is there any other reason, I mean, is there a downside to waiting till after spring break for secondary?
I couldn't understand.
Is there a downside to waiting until after spring break to start secondary, just to make sure we can get the vaccinations done?
Yeah, 2 weeks of educational instruction.
But we've done this for 10 months, is I guess
Right.
the point I'm trying to make is we have followed the guidelines and the maps, and I just want us to consider it. And I think one of my last ones, I'm sorry, I'll be done. When we go back, we're obviously going to have some more quarantine issues. If we have to go remote, would the hybrid be an option, or are we going to have to would we be thrust into full virtual?
Say that again? Say that again?
If we're going to have more quarantines, that's
Yeah.
going to be a given.
Yes.
If it gets to the point where we don't have enough subs to cover our teachers, and we have to go, we've talked about going full virtual, full remote, would the hybrid model still be an option? If a teacher has to quarantine, would we still have the hybrid option on the table, or are we going to be thrust into full virtual?
I believe when you make the choice to go full traditional, much like these other districts, that once you have to quarantine, let's say we have to quarantine a second grade teacher, and we don't have enough subs, so we might have to do something with that class. First of all, again, we'd like to try to A, find a sub, B, use whatever staff within the district that we can use to get that covered, C, farm those kiddos out to other classrooms, and then if none of that worked, and we had to quarantine the whole class, we would have to quarantine the whole class, and that teacher could teach remotely to the class. I'm just trying to think. I mean, secondary obviously presents a little bit more of a challenge. It could go either way. I mean, we've had to quarantine more elementary than secondary because I think I stated this last time, secondary staff are able to maintain distance a little bit better, just in their instructional model, and secondary kids aren't necessarily, to quote Michelle Anderson, like little kittens on top of each other like the little ones are. So they can typically maintain their distance, and your secondary kids aren't necessarily in faces. We have asked our secondary teachers through our principals meetings that if they do have to be in closer contact with a student to help them on an assignment or whatever that specific situation looks like, that maybe they put on their shield as well to protect them. But for the most part, our secondary staff members have not been exposed by students.
Under the hybrid model.
That is correct.
Yeah.
But they're still the same distance teaching.
But they won't be the same distance teaching when they're back full traditional, correct?
They could be. It's the kids who are going to be in closer contact with each other than the staff with the students. Now, in some cases, that may not be the case, but for the most part,
right.
if you're a secondary teacher and you're more to the front of the class or the side of the classroom, you can still attempt to keep your distance. When you go to full traditional, it's more the students and the number of students who are going to be impacted by exposure. Now, that is not to say that that's not going to occur with the staff member. I'm
Right.
definitely not saying that.
Yeah.
But I do know, I heard from one principal who has told her staff, you teach from your corner or you're up front and stay away from the kiddos as much as you possibly can and deliver that instruction. I know that's not ideal. It's sure not the way we teach in Deer Creek. But again, we're in a pandemic, so we're going to make do however we need to.
Right. Our next board meeting, scheduled board meeting, is March 8th. I believe that's the day that secondary is supposed to return. Again, I would ask the board to consider if we could wait until the next board meeting, because obviously we're going to have more information, whether it's about the spread with the primary grades. We'll have more information about the vaccine. Again, I would strongly urge the board to consider having secondary return after spring break. I know you say it's losing 2 weeks of instruction, but they're still getting the instruction. They're still on a hybrid model. They're still getting to go 2 days a week, and they still have virtual 3 days. So it's not a complete loss of instruction. That's kind of how sometimes I kind of don't like the phrase return to learn, because they are learning. And from what I've heard from a lot of teachers, most are doing well. I'm not saying that some aren't, but it sounds like we're still getting some good results from our kiddos and from our teachers. And so
Our teachers are doing a phenomenal job.
Yeah. So,
Phenomenal.
return to in-person learning is probably more accurate. But anyway, I've said what I need to say. I just wanted it to have, we need to have these hard questions and hard discussions, and because otherwise, like I said, these stories, they take on a life of their own. So I thank you guys for listening.
So first of all, I'd like to just really thank our teachers again, because here they get thrown an Arctic winter and they pivot and go to full virtual. It's just one more bad thing this year has had to offer, and I think that shows great leadership in our buildings that allowed our teachers to do that also. The one good thing about this Arctic winter is that it's going to enforce us to do some partial lockdown, which is also going to help drive the numbers down, which are rapidly declining right now. Right now, we're at numbers where we were around the 1st of October. So I would expect those numbers to continue to go down. The thing about the vaccine, and I appreciate Lori, because it's obvious she's done a lot of work and brought up a lot of good points about this. But once the CDC, the guidelines are going to move to, once you're vaccinated, you don't need to quarantine anymore. I don't think that's out yet, but that's where they're going to move to. So if we can get the majority of our teachers vaccinated on the 22nd with Moderna, 2 weeks later they're 80% immunity, so that would basically take care of the secondary schools. 80%, and the way our numbers are excellent. I would not hesitate to go back if we can get our teachers vaccinated within that time frame. And you're right, Lori, things are changing so fast. I mean, within the 2 weeks, look what's happened. We've had the governor come out and announce that the teachers are going to be vaccinated, and I really appreciate our parents emailing the governor and asking that, because they're the only ones he was the only one that could make that happen. We couldn't. So that has been a big thing for us to be thankful for. I think with this, over these next 2 weeks, we're going to see another drastic fall in our numbers, and I think we're going to be okay going back. But I agree with you. I think we need to be nimble, like we've said all along. We need to be able to meet again if we need to within the next 2 weeks and make other decisions. And just because we made a decision a couple weeks ago, which I've always felt like once the board makes a decision, we're all behind it, and you feel that the same way, that we're going to move forward. But that doesn't mean, just like you say, that we cannot change those things as things go forward. And who knows what the next 2 weeks are going to bring. I expect us to be out of school, if you believe the meteorologist, and who knows, but we might be out of school 3 days next week, and that gives us 10, 12 days of being apart from each other, and that slows down the virus also. So I think you bring up some great points, and I think we just need to continually be vigilant and look at this and consider our options every time we're together. And I so appreciate you bringing this up, because I think we all needed to hear this too.
Thank you.
And if we can get Chick-fil-A to help us vaccinate, it won't take long at all.
Put in the chicken. Yes, I just think, Mrs. Bamford, thank you for keeping the conversation going, as they say. It's always hard. It's hard to be an opinion and give your opinion, and people everybody sees it, and it's hard for all of us to do that. And I appreciate you keeping the conversation going and voicing those concerns. From what I would say would be that, from my perspective, I would remain with the decision we made 2 weeks ago, and I would do that based on several things. One would be our internal data. Two would be the external data we've seen from other schools who are going full traditional, and I know it may be comparing. No school is the same, and if you talk to those schools, they'll tell you, they're social distance some places and they're not social distance at others. But again, they're not. It's not all the same situation. I believe we will be able to follow the CDC all the mitigating factors. And if you look at our current zip code numbers for Deer Creek, 75% of our students right now are in the green or low yellow, which Danny, we haven't been in that since before this started. Because I was tracking weekly numbers back in September, October, before they came out with this, where they did it for you. And I mean, the lowest we ever got as a district was about 14. And so now 75% of our students are in either there's 0, they're less than 7 or 8. The other 25% are 73013, which is they're like 35, I think, which is orange 1 or 2, and they are, and that's like Lone Oak, I think, and maybe the neighborhoods around Spring Creek, maybe. Remington.
Epworth. Or the.
No.
Oh, sorry.
No. And that's the other 25% of our students, and so and that zip code is basically south half of Edmond, including Oklahoma Christian. So I feel very confident about our community numbers being low. I've personally also talked to physicians that I know and trust on this, people that have worked at it at the hospital level, infectious disease doctors at the hospital level, and they're also working with the state level on this disease, as well as pediatric infectious disease doctors across the country who are currently doing studies with the CDC on quarantining and study. I mean, they're testing, they get a positive, they're testing everybody around that person. They're even testing the DNA strain of the virus, so if they transmit, they know that's what transmitted, and they're getting the pilot studies out on that, and they're very positive as far as the quarantining goes, and having to be, as long as we're following these things as far as hand washing, face masks, being diligent with all those social distancing to the extent possible, that we can be successful in doing this. And just like Mrs. Bamford said, this decision and the decisions and the opinions we have, everyone up here has their opinion and makes a decision, and it's not based on a Facebook post or a bully email. It's based on the research we've done, that we've done throughout this since September, since this all started, even back into last summer when we started talking about this, talking to other professionals, other schools, other school districts, other school board members, talking to all kinds of attorneys. And so, and that's why I feel strongly that we continue to go the way we are going, and voted 2 weeks ago. Any other comments on that?
Just to reiterate that our decisions are, we take into consideration all sides of this and that there's no 100% accurate decision. But we've proven ourselves to be logical and reasonable and to make data-based decisions. I do agree to stay nimble and to reevaluate. I appreciate the suggestion that we keep this on the agenda each month. I don't want to send a message that that means we're going to vote on it every month, but just for the community to know that we are in constant state of assessment of, you know, how the district is doing. And that this decision is not made lightly at all, and we are absolutely disappointing somebody, no matter how the vote lands. But I do agree to stay with what we've decided and reassess as needed.
And just like everybody said, this is a very fluid situation, and we have to keep the conversation going, I think. But doesn't mean we're going to change it every 2 weeks, but we need to keep talking about it. Anything else? Okay. All right, if there's no other business with number 2, we're going to move on to E, executive session. Is there anything for executive session? Any board members for executive session? No. Okay. H, discussion and possible vote on the superintendent's recommendation concerning employment as listed on the personnel schedule. Do I have a motion to accept the superintendent's recommendation?
I move to accept superintendent's recommendation concerning employment as listed on the personnel schedule.
Second. Bamford?
Yes.
Lay, yes. Keen?
Yes.
Neves?
Yes.
Barnes?
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
I, adjournment.
Move for adjournment to the fireplace.
Second.
Barnes?
Yes.
Neves?
Yes.
Keen?
Yes.
Lay, yes. Bamford?
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0. The time is 6:17.
Thank you, everyone.